Good morning and welcome to West Palm 2015 M&A Advisory Conference on Bankruptcy and Restructuring. Today we have one of the most senior and oldest names in bankruptcy who's been there, author of one of our favorite books, Turnaround Kid, interesting book on restructuring, and he's been there with turnarounds for companies like Chrysler, Bethlehem Steel, Hawker Beechcraft, and Delphi, most notably. Steve Miller, chairman of AIG, and he's with MidOcean Partners. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you.
So given, I'm going to lean more on autos and the auto industry, given your background in autos, what is your outlook on the auto industry? And that means not just the big three, but also the parts makers.
Well, first off, the way you ask the question suggests it's more American focused than global. But don't forget that most of the world's population is still getting into an economic frame where that they can afford private transportation. And private transportation is in high demand, and that's why the automakers are continuing to grow at a rapid rate. But the growth is more exacerbated in China and in other countries even than in the U.S. The U.S., however, the rate of the market is now double what it was in '08. I mean, it was running 15 to 17 million light vehicles a year. It fell down at the crash down to about 8 million units annual rate, and then has been steadily coming back. I'm an eternal optimist about autos because I think the demand for private transportation is just something that people want if they can possibly afford it and will always reach for it. So there's good fundamental demand for automobiles. The next point I would make is, the automobiles are getting better and much more durable. It used to be, after 2 or 3 years, your vehicle might, rust out and become a junk heap. But these days, cars are built to last for a very long time. I have one at home that's now about 10 years old, and it still runs just fine. Some of the inherent demand is being absorbed by the fact that a vehicle is just a more durable product, which is all to the good for all kinds of reasons. Part of the question is, will there be a vibrant auto industry in America? And I would say absolutely yes. And why do I say that? For one thing, the auto industry as I define it is not just the traditional 3 American automakers. It is all the companies who choose to construct factories in America to assemble motor vehicles. And that includes Japanese and Koreans, and you can just bet that the Chinese will be there someday. The Europeans have a number of factories between Volkswagen and Mercedes and so on. And so why are they doing that? And I would say the most basic reason is if you've got a solid customer base somewhere on the planet, as a manufacturer, you have an advantage if you are assembling the vehicles close to the market. And that's because customer tastes are always changing very rapidly as to what kind of vehicle do they want and so on. And if you're having to ship a vehicle, have it spend a month on the water getting to the customer, you may miss the market and have the wrong stuff. And therefore you want to be close to the customer. And now to finish this long-winded answer to your short question, as a supplier base, the answer is it depends.
Okay.
It depends on which kind of part. And my 2 extremes would be at one side, spark plug, and on the other, the heating and air conditioning system in a car. A spark plug is very stable technology. It doesn't change from day to day or month to month or even year to year. It is just a spark plug. It's very labor intensive, and therefore it will be made in a low labor cost country like China or some other place, because you not only can take the labor advantage, but you can ship it very expeditiously. You can put 1,000 spark plugs in a box.
Sure.
On the other hand, a heating and air conditioning unit, with a big air plenum and all that, you can't make that in China and ship it here. You'll be eaten alive by the transport costs. So it will be made close to the auto assembly plant, which by definition, as I said before, is going to be close to the ultimate customer. So for all those reasons, I think America will have a healthy auto industry, forever.
Right.
And as long as you define it as it's, all competitors, regardless of what their nationality is,
Sure.
they will build cars here. And the supply base will have a healthy industry situation by being close to those auto assembly plants.
So all the issues that we saw several years ago, Ford did an out-of-court restructuring, Chrysler and GM had to go to the court. Those issues are ironed out enough that they're back to vibrancy, in your opinion?
Well, I'd say they are both vibrant and they are enjoying this rapid re-rise of the auto industry from 8 million to 17 million annualized units in the US. But they still do have pension and health care liabilities. They got moderated and compromised in the bankruptcy, but not eliminated. And they also have union contracts that control not just the pay and benefit of an individual worker, but the work rules that drive the plant. And so Ford, GM, and Chrysler still have a disadvantage to the transplants of having to observe all the union work rules within the plant, which means you actually got a lot more people for the same amount of output that the transplant manufacturers would have.
What other industries are out there that we may not be aware of that are enduring those same problems or challenges, such as the auto industry? We've seen some massive restructuring going on in casinos. We just had there, and we've seen power and in energy. What do you think about those areas? Or
well, I know almost nothing about casinos, except it's a great place for me to lose money, and it looks like lately a lot of investors are losing their money there too. And there may be some restructurings at the edges, but basically it's there's still very high consumer demand for casino product. And and what's amazing to me, it used to be when I was much younger, you had to go to Las Vegas to go to a casino. Now it's every state, every big city has got casino options, and so the employment base of the casino industry is got to be many, many times what it used to be, and there's still very high demand for that product. So I think that industry has a great future. Energy is not going away, even though its oil prices have come down. That will affect some of the producing activity. There may be less hysteria than there was a year or two ago, but people are not going to stop consuming energy.
Right.
And therefore, there's going to be, continued good, employment for that. I think over the next year or two, you're going to see some corporate restructurings. Some people are going to have too much debt, and you're going to have restructurings that may affect the equity that's invested in particular energy-related industries. But as an industry in total, I think it's a great place to be. This would be now a good time to get in.
As an investor?
As an investor, absolutely.
Okay. Are you involved with any businesses that are trying to get involved with that as a distressed player?
Yeah, I'm as private equity goes, we've been looking at some energy-related activities. Haven't yet made the plunge, but it's on our radar screen.
Okay. One of the more fascinating parts of your book, The Turnaround Kid, was how you spent time in a cafeteria with workers and just interacted and listened to their gripes. This was back in your Chrysler days. And I thought that was interesting. Do you think enough managers are doing that? Because sometimes you wonder if the CEO and the C-suite is reaching out to the cafeteria the way you did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was not only at Chrysler, but at every place I've been. Instead of going to a lot of places I've been, used to have an executive dining room, so you could be sequestered from the masses.
Right.
But I would go straight to the cafeteria, stand in line, pay for my own meal, and then go sit randomly at a table that had 6 chairs and 5 people, and just go sit down. Hey, I'm Steve. How are you? And what do you do? And sometimes they would recognize me as the CEO, and sometimes not. About halfway through, when they realized who I was, they say, "Oops, I wonder if I've said anything. But the point is, you learn so much information about what's going on down in the company
Right.
that never seems to filter its way up to the executive floor.
Do you think restructuring professionals recognize that tactic, and do you think there are people that do that, or are you on your own?
Well, here's I mean, I'm a tangentially, I guess, a restructuring professional because I've gone into restructuring so many times. What I have found when I go into a situation where the thing just hit the wall, the crisis is there, I spend the first month or so, as often as I can, going out to dinner or having meetings one-on-one with every one of the most senior people in the company, and let them unload on me, because I am new. Right. They don't really know what I stand for.
Right.
They think, and I am, a sponge to take in information, and they want to give their spin to what the problem is and how it should be fixed. And you can learn more then. You wait 6 months, now you're back to office politics as usual.
Sure.
And people are much more reserved about what they're going to talk about.
Do you think that folks could apply that idea when it comes to Chapter 9 bankruptcies? I saw you in the audience there looking at how people were recalling their experiences with Detroit, and one wonders, could that same be applied, that tactic, to Detroit, just reaching out to people?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You've got to be.
It's not just Detroit, by the way. Well, it's any Chapter 9.
I think in order to, even more than absolutely agreeing with people, people want to be listened to.
Right.
They want to have the opportunity to give their point of view to whoever the decision maker is, and therefore it's very important to be approachable, to listen, to not be argumentative, but to be sympathetic and understanding. And I think you heard in that panel a lot of sympathy toward the real hard questions there. Nobody was saying that the citizens of Detroit are bad people.
Right.
No,
right.
They deserve better, and but because of the past and how the city got there, you got some very hard choices in front of you. But what I heard them talking about was that they had listened, they understood the human drama behind the tough questions that they had.
We hear a lot about emerging markets seeing weakness in those economies, notably Brazil. Europe is got problems that are not just economic growth, but also sorting out how they're going to handle Greece's issues with the Greek debt and their balance sheet. What do you think that does to U.S. businesses? Does that stir up restructuring activity? And it's not just the manufacturers. I'm looking at the financial services or anybody in that wide spectrum of a corporate.
Well, I mean, one thing about Europe, and particularly Western Europe, is they, in order to protect workers, built up these incredibly strong labor laws. And you basically, in a country like France, you can't fire a worker. You have to pay them, call it 10 years worth of wages or something, and
Sure.
It becomes prohibitive. And the good news is that you have far fewer mass layoffs. Companies sometimes find a way to create activity if I've got to pay for this worker, I might as well find something for him to do. But ultimately, it discourages hiring. And that is why we've got kind of two classes in Western Europe: people who've got a job and people who can't find a job.
Right.
And that problem is getting worse. And then the fact that the governments have taken on so much of the safety nets for these people, you've created the need to raise taxes to where you're discouraging investment as well as employment. And I think Greece is the canary in the mine shaft. It's in deep trouble, but it just got there first. The rest of Europe is headed for a big problem, and so are we here in America. We have the public obligations we keep taking on. I mean, it's not just the current amount of debt. It is all the public employee promises that we're making to people that create situations like Detroit. Detroit got there first,
right?
But there are going to be a lot more Detroits.
Coming closer back to our shores, one of the more interesting aspects in recollections you had in Turnaround Kid was I believe there was an opera house or a orchestra that you
Orchestra.
and it was in Ohio or Michigan?
Detroit.
It was the Detroit Orchestra.
Yeah.
And we noticed that in New York, one of the great capitals of art and entertainment, they had a bankruptcy of New York City Opera, and we saw one also, I believe, in Texas or New Mexico. These nonprofits, or these unusual sort of Chapter 11s, what was your experience to that? What could you advise to other operas or entertainment field areas that are experiencing that downturn?
Well, the first question I ask in any situation is it worth doing? So why would, when I took over the Detroit Symphony, I was not a classic music junkie, okay? Elvis was my idea of good classic music. But the Detroit Symphony brought hundreds of thousands of people a year to downtown Detroit. And I thought, if downtown Detroit is going to even survive rather than just turn off the lights and close up, we need to bring nightlife down there. And so for that reason alone, I thought this was a project worth doing. Having said that, okay, now what do you do? We had the musicians were on strike, the audiences had disappeared. The mayor was kicking us out of the venue, which was called Ford Auditorium at the time, because he wanted to convert it to an aquarium. Okay. The executive director had quit, the conductor had quit, he was going to Toronto instead of Detroit. So this was an organization that was dead. Oh, and then, by the way, it had 100 musicians, none of them African American, and we're in the heart of an African American city. So the legislators from the city of Detroit, representing Detroit in Lansing, the state capital, wanted to cut off all the state aid to the orchestra as well. They wanted to kill it. So what do you do?
Right.
Well, you go first, you go talk to people and you say, look, you want to kill it, we can kill it, but that's not going to be good for the city of Detroit. We need to save this orchestra. We need to do it in a way that brings community pride. So give me the time. We will get a more racially balanced representation on the stage. Try and bring the community together rather than divide the community. I got a great new executive director. I got a great new conductor who brought life back to the orchestra. We rebuilt the decrepit orchestra hall that had been the historic home of the orchestra, had been abandoned, the roof had fallen in, the place was a mess, and we restored it to grandeur. It's now called the Max Fisher Center for the Performing Arts. And ultimately, my best moment of all that was the African American representatives of Detroit in the legislature ended up fighting for the funding as opposed to wanting to kill the orchestra.
So you won them over.
Yeah, so, but it's all about working with people, talking about what you can do, what you can't do, being honest where you have to be honest, and convincing them of the importance of the survival of the institution.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to speak with you and see you again. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.